going to show you my recipe for making bread. It's going to be pretty simple. First thing you're going to need is a bowl of some sort. In this case, I got myself a stainless steel bowl. You're going to need to have some yeast and some flour. Where's my flour at? There it is. Is this the old bread flour? Some yeast, some flour, and some sugar. And water. So the first thing we do is we grab ourselves a cup. That's a 1 cup measure. And we're going to measure out 1 cup of flour. Like so. Then we're going to measure out about a tablespoon of sugar. Then we're going to take about 2 cups of warm water. Not cold water, not hot water. Now if you're to be technical about it, it's got to be below 117 degrees Fahrenheit. I say just try to make sure the hot water that you're going to use coming out of your tap, it's about skin temperature or thereabouts. It's not cold, not hot, it's lukewarm. Just like so, 2 cups of warm water, mix it in there. Then you take yourself oh, I ain't got a whisk in here, so I'm going to find one in the other drawer. There we go. You take yourself a little whisk thing here and you mix up the flour and the sugar and the water until you get a nice wet, soupy mix. There you go. It's mixing away, and you keep mixing and mixing until you get all the flour and all the sugar mixed up. Then you take your yeast. In this case, I'm using this is Red Star Quick Rise. Well, you can use pretty much any yeast, but these are little tiny packets. The way you want to think about it is 1 packet per 1 loaf. And you open up the packets however you're going to open up the packets. This one here I cut with scissors. There's other ways. I'm using scissors because I'm a scissor user. I like using tools. Then you mix the yeast up with warm water, the wheat, flour, and sugar. Just like that. There you go. Whoa, ho, ho, ho. There you go. Until the yeast is all mixed up. I want to try to get all the yeasties in there. Trying to wake them up. I got a bunch on my whisk here. That's weird. Anyway, okay, so now I've got my yeasties mixed up. I'm going to let them set for about an hour or about a half hour to an hour so that they wake up the yeasties. Okay, some cling wrap, saran wrap, whatever. Clear plastic, and I'm going to cover the bowl while it's doing its thing. The purpose of the plastic is to keep bugs out, like flies. Keep weird stuff out of there while it's waking up, while the yeasties are waking up. So as you see right here is our little bowl of yeasties covered in plastic waiting for the little yeasties to wake up. And we'll be back in about a half hour or so to see that, check their progress. You can't really see it. Anyway, there might be a little bit of moisture on the thing. And if you look, I'm going to hold this up to the camera. You'll notice it's all bubbling. Well, that tells you that the yeast is producing carbon dioxide and has, in fact, waken up, which is cool. Next thing you're going to need is a wooden spoon. Like in this case, I got this bamboo spoon here. It's got a little curved edge, but you can use a regular wooden spoon as long as you're careful. You can probably use just about anything as long as you can mix as you go. Anyway, here we go. We're going to take a little yeast. We're going to take a little flour. We got a little cup here. Let me dry it out. Make sure there's no moisture in there because I rinsed it out after the last time. Anyway, we got a little cup measure here. We're going to add 1 cup at a time. It doesn't matter how much is in there, just you're going to add 1 cup. You know, you could be a little over the top or a little bit, doesn't really matter. What we're doing is we're going to mix it until the stuff starts to turn out doughy. Right now it's still soupy. That's 1 cup. Add another cup. That's 2. Ooh, starting to thicken now. I'm scraping the edges and mixing the flour in. I don't want to have like I want a homogeneous mixture. I don't want like have parts, big chunks of dry stuff in there. Now it's starting to get sticky after 2. Now we're going to add the 3rd one. 3rd cup's going in. Again, we mix carefully. Now you'll notice I am not using a bread mixer. I'm not using a bread machine. I'm not using any kind of, it's all manual labor. Which means you don't have to buy any special equipment. You don't have to do anything exotic to make bread. Bread has been made for thousands of years by hand. It's only in the last century that they started using electric machines. Now you'll notice it's rather sticky at this point. So what we're going to do, now we got to, it's like dough. So we're going to grab some flour. We're going to throw it on a cutting board or whatever kind of thing you got. You can lay it out on. You'll notice it's real sticky. See that sticky? That's cool. That don't mean nothing. It's just the way it's. It can be a little less sticky. It can be whatever. But basically, you want to throw it out onto a floured board. If you have to, like for whatever reason, you can use a nice clean counter, but you got to make sure it is clean. You don't want to be picking up any bacteria or fungi from the countertop as you're going. And now I've scraped off and stuff. I'm going to get all these little, there we go. So you know what I forgot to add? I forgot to add, see, like if you forget to add something, that's cool too. Because you can always add it later. And you can add this stuff anytime you want to. I'm going to add a little olive oil. It's about a tablespoon or so. I'm going to mix it in as I need. You can add it before, during. I wouldn't add it after, but I want to add it. And you don't absolutely have to have it if you're in a survival mode and you haven't got oil of any sort. Yeah, I'm using olive oil here. You can use salad oil of any kind. Throw a little flour on there. Okay, now you can see it's real sticky. It's also that I can still work it. Now to work the dough when it's this sticky, you got to put flour on your hands. The idea is you're going to be kneading, but we want to make sure we don't add too much flour, because if you add too much flour, it makes for a heavy bread. You want to have it fairly light. Now that's about 3.5 cups total I've added, maybe a little more, 3.5 cups approximately. It's going to get up to about 4 cups when I'm all done. So I grabbed some more flour. There we go. And you're going to be kneading this for about 5-10 minutes or however long it takes until it feels velvety. Now that's kind of a weird phrase, but you'll know what it feels. Right now it feels sticky and it doesn't feel right, which is fine. You're just going to have to keep kneading. If you got a lumpy mixture for some reason, that you just got to keep kneading until the lumpiness is out. If you've added too much flour, it's kind of hard to undo that, which is why you want to mix a little bit at a time until you get the right consistency. Now, the right consistency can vary slightly depending on the time of year, the amount of humidity in the air, and the ambient temperature. So, each time you want to do it. And it's going to be different from the last time you did it. But what we're looking for is a unique consistency. Basically, it's going to be velvety. Now you see, I'm just doing this by hand. It ain't really that difficult. All I'm doing is pushing down and folding and rolling. And I'm sure someone out there is going to say, "Oh, he's doing it wrong." Well, you know, as long as you get it all mixed up and homogeneous, and you get a velvety textured dough when you're finished, it ain't done wrong. Another thing you got to remember is as you go, you want to clean up as you go. That means you'll see all the flour laying all over the counter and everything. You want to wipe that up after you get to the next step. Now, as you see, I added the oil last. That's cool. You can do that pretty much anywhere. But basically, you're just going to add a little oil of some sort. It doesn't stop any sticking or anything. It just basically helps make for a good mixture and a good flavor. And you can make this stuff without using a whole lot of oil of any sort. I have made loaves of bread. They just turn out a little crumblier for some reason. I mean, they still hold together, but they're not quite as quite like the French bread type stuff. It's just not quite right if you don't add a little oil. You don't have to add a lot of oil. You can use shortening if you want to. It's just a little more difficult to mix in, but you can do that. So we've got about 4 cups of flour in there. You ain't gotta knead it forever. It feels just about right now. It's not really that. I mean, there ain't no thing that says, "Oh, you've got to mix it for this long." Well, that's kind of ridiculous considering that's not the kind of bread I'm making. Okay, I'm going to let that sit there. Now remember that pan, that bowl I used before? I'm going to clean that out real quick. With dish soap. Getting all the flour off of my hands. There's the next step. I gotta go grab some more stuff. Now I've rinsed out my bowl. I'm gonna take a nice clean towel and dry it out. Set it right there. I want to make sure the bowl is nice and dry. I don't want any moisture in there at all. And I'll show you, this is my technique. You don't have to use it. You can use a glass bowl or whatever you want to do. If you got some other technique, that's cool too. But here's my technique for making sure the dough, as it's rising, does not stick to the bowl. We're doing, this is regular old cheap shortening, not name brand. I got a very small amount. This is like, you know, just a couple, just that's it. And I just rub it in there, all around the inside of the bowl. Now that piece of cellophane you originally covered, you're going to be using that again. So hopefully you didn't throw it out. But if you did, you can just grab another cellophane. Anyway, cellophane. So after you grease the bowl, you put the dough inside the bowl. Set it somewhere near an oven, not on top of the oven, but near where your oven is going to be. And you preheat your oven to 375 degrees or thereabouts. Now the actual temperature for your oven might be slightly different. But that's because each oven is different, and each place where the oven is situated is different. Again, comes down to time of year, humidity, all the rest. Now the next thing you're going to do after you're going to let this stuff rise for about an hour. It's basically going to double over. It's going to go from where it's at right now, which is about the size of from about here. It's going to come up to about here. And what we're going to do while we're waiting for it to rise is again cover it with a little piece of plastic. Now, if you were like so inclined, you could you can spray a little non-stick on dough so it doesn't stick to plastic. I'm not going to waste any of my spray or anything like that for that reason, because it's just for convenience. Now here I'm going to clean off all my stuff while I'm waiting for the yeast to rise. And I'm also preheating the oven at 375. At this point for me, I do not need my flour anymore. I'm going to be going on to another step. I use some corn flour for my next step. However, if anybody who's ever done any kind of baking in the past, this step will be very familiar to you. Now, I'm going to make two types of loaves here. I've got my regular little loaf pan here, and I've got my trusty large pan. Now you can tell I've used this quite a bit. That brown stuff ain't gonna hurt nothing. It's actually called I don't know what the hell they call it. Baked on grease is what you're gonna call it. Anyway, what you're gonna do with your pans is you're gonna take your Crisco or your all vegetable shredding or whatever kind of stuff you're using. I don't care if you use lard. I don't do pork myself, but anyway, you're gonna smear it a thin coat on the pan. Now I'm going to be making, like I said, two types of loaves here. One is going to be a French style loaf, and one is going to be a regular loaf. Now grease the pan. I'll grease the other pan. Doesn't have to be any kind of thick stuff, just a real thin coating. Some people like to put a little plastic baggie over the fingers. I prefer to like wash my hands before I cook. Anyway, at this point, I'm going to rinse off all this stuff off my hands. There you go. So far, so good. Now I use corn. I use basically corn flour. This is corn masa mix that's used to make tortillas and whatnot. You can use corn meal. You can use regular flour. It don't really matter. I'm going to sprinkle some in there. Sprinkle some in the other pan. I'm going to mix it around. A truly self-sustainable person would be able to make his own cornmeal using a coffee grinder and a bunch of corn he's grown in his yard. I'm not quite there yet, but eventually I'll get there where I ain't got to buy my own cornmeal to make bread. I'm still trying to figure out why they say that, like, traditional French bread making requires that you throw down cornmeal on a baking surface before you throw the loaves on there. Well, prior to the conquest of the Americas by the Europeans, corn was unknown to Europe. Yet somehow they still managed to make bread. Yeah, you don't really need cornmeal. You can use flour. If you got a stone type oven, you probably don't even need to use any of that. It's up to you. But as you can tell now, I have put a light coating of cornmeal on the inside of my loaf pan, and I'm going to be making a braid for this pan here. And they're going to bake side by side at the same temperature for the same amount of time, and you're going to see how beautiful they turn out. So I'll be back in about 45 minutes or so after my dough is doubled. All right, it's already increased in size by about 25% or so, and it's only been a few minutes. So make sure you clean up as you go, though. That way you ain't got a big mess to clean up when you're done. Our dough has doubled. It is quite the size now. I take the plastic off. Here's where it gets to be a little fun. I'm going to take my cutting board back down. I'm going to get some flour back out. I'm going to flour the cutting board again. Punch down the dough. As you can see, it did increase in size dramatically. Set it right there. Now in this case, I'm making 2 loaves. I'm going to cut the thing in half. Take one of these, throw them in the loaf pan. I'm not going to roll it and knead it and all that because I don't want little bubbles to be in there. I want a light bread. I don't want a heavy bread. I just let it sit there like this, and we're going to let that rise again. This other, just for demonstration purposes, because you can make this into anything. You can make this into a couple baguettes. You can cut this down and make yeast rolls. Throw them in muffin pans, and you can make bagels. You can make anything you really want to out of this stuff, because it's just basically bread. Anything you make out of bread, you can turn this into. I'm going to make a braid. So we've got our 3 little cuts here. One of them's a bit more than it should. That's about right. Okay. And I'm going to turn each of these things. I cut it into thirds, and I'm going to turn each of these into like a string like so. You see that? So far so good. And if you can braid hair, you can braid rope, you can braid anything. You can braid bread. I make 3. 1. Oh, oh. Let me see if I can adjust this camera a little bit. There you go. Making about all the same length. Okay. I've got 3. They're not perfectly round or anything like that because this stuff's going to rise again anyway. So I take the end and I pinch it up so it sticks together, and then I start braiding. And I braid it until it's all the way down. I pinch it on the end there. And there's my braid. You see that? Let's see if I can show it to you. There's my braided bread. Okay, so then I take the braided bread and I throw it on the pan where I put the corn flour. And I'm going to let these 2 rise. I'm going to set this loaf right next to it. And we're going to let these 2 loaves rise one more time. Like I said before, clean up as you go, and at the end of the day, you won't have any mess to clean up. And I'm going to clean up and let the stuff rise. It's going to be another half hour to an hour of rising. So far, I can't remember what time I started this, but it's only been an hour and a half or so, and I'm already to this stage. Kind of things you can do while the bread's rising. You can clean the bathroom, clean the kitchen, clean the living room, start soup, whatever the heck you're going to do. This doesn't have to rule your whole day. This is just, and it takes a while to get, you can watch TV, play video games, as long as you don't let the stuff get out of hand. The dough has doubled in size in the pan, so what we're going to do now is we're going to bake these at 375 for 40 minutes. Now, one of the things I do while I'm baking is I'll take a cup I have, and I'll fill it with water and place it in the oven. Let's see, where's my cup? It's not in there. 40 minutes. I've got a timer that I just set for 40 minutes. So let me see if I can center myself and start over. Stick it in the oven for about 40 minutes. Actually, I set my timer for 40 minutes. My timer has a couple alarms on it. One goes off at 10 minutes prior, and one goes off at 5 minutes prior. So like at 30 minutes, I'll check the bread to make sure everything's going fine, but I'll let it bake through to 40 minutes. You want the bread to be baked, and when it comes out, you'll see what color it should be, or what color I like it to be. And we'll go from there. 40 minutes, let's go check our bread, shall we? Oh, look at that, isn't that gorgeous? First, as you can tell, we got a nice braid here. Oh, look at that braid. Let's see if I can get a better view of it. That's a nice looking braid. And we got a nice loaf. Get it. Now, if you got a pan, you want to get the loaf out of the pan as soon as you can. They say when you tap the bottom of the loaf, now this is, should sound hollow. I guess it sounds hollow. You take the bread and put it on the cooling rack. Turn off the oven. And allow the bread to cool. Like I said, you clean it up as you go. You won't have a big mess later. Now the bread you can actually cut lengthwise, make a sandwich out of it for a whole bunch of people, like 8 people, I guess, six or 8 people. Or you can tear it off chunks for like soup or stews or whatnot. The loaf itself, you slice into thin slices for sandwiches and toast. And there you are. 2 loaves of bread. Now these are a nice golden brown color. Now if you make baguette styles, you can increase temperature to about 400 to 450 degrees and cook it for about 10 or 15 minutes. And the last 5 minutes, what you're going to do is you're going to brush the top of the loaf with egg white and water mix. It's just like basically 1 egg white and a couple tablespoons of water mixed together. You take a brush and you brush it on the loaf, and you can finish baking it up, and it'll make a nice hard crust for the bread. Let this cool, and then I'll have a slice of nice, hot, fresh, homemade bread.